What if you could double or maybe even triple the money you make from your sales letters, your emails, or your pitches? And what if you could do that even if you currently struggle to string two sentences together or, couldn't write your way out of a paper bag?
I mean, that is just a massive promise right out of the gate.
Right. But imagine sitting down, staring at that terrifying blinking cursor on a blank screen, and instead of feeling that usual panic, you actually know exactly how to reach into the mind of your reader and just pull them down the page.
Yeah, it completely challenges the entire cultural myth we have around writing.
Mm,
We've been conditioned, basically since high school, to believe you need to be some sort of gifted, natural-born wordsmith to actually persuade people.
totally. Like the lone genius in a cabin waiting for the muse to strike.
Exactly. But when you look at what actually drives revenue, what actually gets people to act, that whole literary genius thing is, well, it's almost entirely irrelevant.
Which is incredibly relieving for the rest of us, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, today we are exploring the foundational secrets of direct response copywriting. We're specifically pulling from the opening sections of Ben Settle's Crypto Copywriting Secrets. And you're going to learn a remarkably simple 5-step framework for crafting persuasive messages, starting heavily with the psychology of headlines.
It's such good stuff.
It really is. For anyone interested in business entrepreneurship or, frankly, just getting people to pay attention to your ideas, mastering this is the ultimate shortcut. It's all about getting inside your prospect's head and making your solution just utterly impossible to ignore.
And, we should probably establish right up front why this specific source material actually carries weight. Like, why should you listen to this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The methods we're about to tear apart, they come from over a decade of deep in the trenches direct response experience. The author has written for some serious heavy hitters. We're talking 7-figure marketers like Ken McCarthy and Mike Dillard.
So this isn't just theory.
No, not at all. This isn't theoretical marketing fluff drawn up in some university auditorium by people who have literally never sold a product. This is street-level, psychologically tested architecture that has, collectively, moved millions of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah. And the text actually opens with this brilliant quote from the legendary copywriter Gene Schwartz. He said, "Always shoot for the moon. It's one of the few real thrills left today."
I love that. One of the few real thrills left. That quote really frames everything we're about to talk about today.
It really does.
Because if you're trying to build a business or launch a product, playing it safe as well. It's the most dangerous thing you can do. You can't just be mildly interesting anymore. You have to be captivating.
You have to grab them by the collar.
Right. And the source material starts by completely demystifying the actual structure of a sales pitch. It takes this thing that seems like dark magic, arranging words in a way that makes a total stranger pull out their credit card, and it breaks it down into a very rigid skeleton.
A skeleton that, honestly, most creative people initially rebel against.
Wait, really? Why do they rebel?
Because when people picture great advertising, they usually imagine some cinematic television commercial or, Don Draper in a tailored suit pitching this profound, poetic narrative that makes executives weep in a boardroom.
Oh, sure, the whole Mad Men aesthetic.
Exactly. But the reality of direct response copywriting, the kind that generates immediate measurable revenue, it relies on a 5-part framework that is almost aggressively unsexy.
Okay, I'm taking notes. What are the 5 parts?
It's just this: the headline, the lead, the story, the bullets, and the close.
Wait, that's it?
That's it.
Headline, lead, story, bullets, close. I mean, that sounds like something you'd learn in a high school journalism class, not a master class in high-stakes persuasion.
But the simplicity is the point. The biggest mistake beginners make, and the source material highlights this immediately, is that they sit down and try to write these killer campaigns. They try to be overly clever.
Right, they want to sound smart.
Exactly. They write to sound witty, aiming for the kind of prose that makes other writers or marketers give them high fives on Twitter. They're basically performing for the applause of their peers.
Oh, man, I am definitely guilty of that. You want someone to read your email and think, wow, what a brilliant writer.
We all do it. But the true goal of that opening hook, that headline, it isn't to make them admire your intellect. It's to be 1,000% in sync with what the market actually wants and fears.
In sync.
Yes. If you aren't perfectly synchronized with the internal unspoken dialogue that is already playing on a loop in your reader's head, all the clever wordplay in the world won't save your campaign. It'll just fall flat.
So how do we actually get in sync? Because know your audience is I mean, that's the oldest cliche in business. Usually that just means looking at a spreadsheet and saying, okay, our target demographic is married women aged 35 to 50 living in the
Right,
suburbs.
the classic corporate avatar.
Yeah, which is so dry.
It is. And the author provides a much better way. He gives a list of 15 critical questions you must ask about your prospect before you even dare to put pen to paper.
Yeah.
And they have absolutely nothing to do with standard corporate demographics.
Okay, so what are we asking then?
Well, you aren't asking for their zip code. You're mapping their emotional landscape. Let's look at the first few. What keeps them awake at night? What humiliates them? Who are they furious with?
Whoa, let me stop you right at humiliates.
Yeah.
That feels intensely personal, almost invasive for a simple sales pitch. Why is humiliation on a list of marketing questions?
Think about the evolutionary root of humiliation. It is the biological fear of tribal rejection. For our ancestors, being humiliated meant losing status in the tribe, which often meant exile and literally death.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
It is one of the most powerful, visceral drivers of human behavior.
Yeah.
If you are selling a weight loss program, the prospect might want to get healthier, sure. That's a surface level. But what truly drives them, what gets them to pull out their wallet at 2 a.m., might be the quiet humiliation they felt when they couldn't fit into the seat on an airplane, or maybe a passing comment a relative made at Thanksgiving.
That is heavy, but it reframes everything. You aren't selling a diet, you're selling the restoration of dignity.
Spot on. If you understand the humiliation, you understand the burning core of their motivation.
Okay, what are some of the other questions? Because I'm hooked now.
So we have, who are their enemies? What income bracket are they in? What are their political views? What frustrates them most? What do they want more than anything else in the world? What is their most urgent hot-button crisis right now? And what religion, if any, are they?
Wait, religion and politics?
Yeah.
I mean, if I bring those up in a marketing meeting at a standard corporation, HR is going to drag me out of the room. We are taught to stay as far away from those topics as possible to avoid alienating anyone.
And that is exactly why standard corporate marketing is often so boring and ineffective.
Because it's too safe.
Exactly. When you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. Politics and religion dictate a person's core values, their worldview, and how they define good and evil. If you don't know what your prospect values on that deep of a level, you simply cannot speak to them intimately.
That makes a lot of sense.
What you're actually doing with these 15 questions is building a psychological profile. And it's focused almost entirely on negative emotions and deep-seated desires. Anger, fear, urgency. Those are survival instincts.
There's actually a classic adage the author brings up here that perfectly captures this whole shift in perspective, and it's, don't tell me about your weed killer, tell me about my crabgrass.
Oh, I love that one. It is the ultimate distillation of direct response marketing.
Right, because your product, the weed tiller, the chemical formula, the patented spray bottle, that is your world?
Nobody cares about the patented spray bottle.
Exactly. The crabgrass is the prospect's reality. It is the ugly, persistent problem ruining their perfectly manicured lawn. It's the thing they stare at out the kitchen window every single morning with a profound sense of defeat.
If I can run with that for a second, it really reminds me of the dynamics of a cocktail party.
Oh, let's hear it.
So imagine you walk up to someone at a party and spend the next 20 minutes monologuing about yourself.
Yeah.
Your job, your car, your recent vacation, your incredibly efficient weed-killing properties, right?
Right.
The other person is going to be politely nodding while aggressively scanning the room for an exit strategy. Because you are a bore.
Huh. Completely.
But if you walk up and ask them about their life, their struggles, their crabgrass, and you just listen and validate those struggles, they will walk away telling everyone you are the most fascinating, brilliant conversationalist they've ever met.
Because human beings are inherently self-interested. We navigate the world entirely through the lens of our own problems.
Exactly.
When you start your sales message by talking about your product's features, you are demanding that the prospect care about your world. You are creating friction. But when you start by vividly describing the crabgrass in their world, you are seamlessly joining the conversation that is already happening in their head. So the absolute law here, before we even touch the idea of writing a headline, is never start by writing about your product.
Never.
If you start by mapping out the crabgrass using those 15 questions, and you speak directly to their anger, their humiliation, and their desires, you will have their undivided attention.
But once you have mapped that massive emotional landscape, you face a brand new problem.
Which is?
You have all this rich psychological data, But you can't just dump 15 answers onto a page and expect someone to read it. You have to distill it into a core message that actually grabs them by the collar instantly.
Okay, so how do we do that?
This is where we transition from research into execution, using what the old school ad agencies called the knock-knock test.
The knock-knock test. I am fascinated by this concept. Walk me through the mechanics of it.
So it's a mental exercise designed to strip away all your corporate jargon. I want you to imagine you are selling your product door to door long before the internet or social media existed.
Okay, I'm picturing it, briefcase and all.
You walk up to the house of a highly targeted prospect, someone you absolutely know has the exact problem your product solves. You knock on the door. You hear the heavy footsteps. The deadbolt turns. The door opens. And you have exactly one sentence to say.
One sentence to keep a stranger from slamming a door in my face? That is terrifying.
It triggers our own fight or flight response just thinking about it, right?
Yeah, my palms are sweating a little.
That single sentence must achieve two highly difficult, opposing things simultaneously. First, it must disarm the homeowner's biological impulse to reject a salesperson, meaning it must make it impossible for them to slam the door.
Okay.
Second, it must make them practically beg you to come inside their house and tell them more.
Let's ground this in reality, because that sounds almost impossible. The text gives a specific scenario. Give me the prospect, and let's see if we can figure out the pitch.
All right, let's do it. Your target market is an aging type A weekend warrior male. He loves playing hard, maybe watches a lot of action movies, and secretly wishes he had some tough military experience. But biological reality is catching up with him.
He's getting older.
Yeah, he's dealing with chronic aches, joint pain, high cholesterol, and he is quietly terrified of losing his physical edge. He opens the door. What is your one sentence?
Okay, my instinct is to say something like, "Hi, I have a revolutionary new joint supplement with advanced antioxidants that lowers cholesterol." And even as I say it out loud, I can hear the door slamming.
Oh, yeah, slammed instantly.
It's entirely focused on my weed killer. It's so boring.
It's pure feature dumping. Instead, the author provides this exact knock-knock pitch. Listen to this. World's leading military combat instructor declassifies the secret supplement used by the Navy SEALs to battle pain, injury, body fat, and cardiovascular health problems.
Whoa. Okay, let's dissect why that works so well, because there isn't a single scientific feature mentioned in that entire sentence. No antioxidants, no vitamins.
None. If we look back at the 15 questions, this pitch is a masterclass in psychological syncing. First, it targets his ego and his unfulfilled fantasies.
The action movie stuff.
Exactly. He wishes he was a tough guy, so we don't introduce a guy in a lab coat. We introduce a military combat instructor in the Navy SEALs. Second, it hits his physical fears directly, using his exact vocabulary: pain, injury, body fat.
And then there is the framing of the solution itself. Declassifies and secret supplement. Those words do an incredible amount of heavy lifting.
They really do.
It basically turns a boring bottle of vitamins into forbidden knowledge.
Because the psychology of secrets is potent. A secret implies exclusivity. It implies an unfair advantage that the rest of the world doesn't have. It validates his worldview that there are hidden systems of power, and now you are offering him a magical key to join the elite club.
That makes total sense. If you are that specific type of guy and someone says that exact sentence on your porch, you are inviting them into your living room and offering them a beer.
100%.
So the lesson here is pretty brutal, but very necessary. If you can't articulate that one single sentence that would make your ideal customer jump for joy on their doorstep, you are not ready to write your website copy or your email sequence.
You have to pass the knock-knock test first. There's no getting around it.
Right.
Now, assuming you pass the test and you have your core message, the next question is formatting. You don't just type that sentence in plain text at the top of a blank page. You have to dress it up.
Make it look like a real headline.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about direct response is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to invent a new way to communicate. You just need to apply your message to historical psychological formulas.
Yeah, the source text dives into 10 distinct headline formulas. And rather than just listing them off like a boring textbook, let's actually group them by how they manipulate human psychology. Let's start with the ones that bypass skepticism.
That's a great place to start.
Because if I read that Navy SEAL headline, a part of my brain might still think, okay, this is just too good to be true.
Exactly. When you make a massive promise, you automatically trigger a skeptical defense mechanism in the reader. To bypass that, you use the first template, the proof headline.
Okay, the proof headline.
This comes from Gary Benazenga, who is widely considered one of the greatest living copywriters. His golden rule is that you must never make a naked promise.
Wait, what's a naked promise?
A naked promise is a benefit without a believable mechanism. If you just say how to eliminate joint pain, the brain rejects it. It's naked. But if you join proof to your promise by adding the world's leading combat instructor, the authority of the proof short-circuits the skepticism.
Ah, I see. The authority figure essentially vouches for the claim, so the reader doesn't have to take the marketer's word for it.
Precisely.
But what happens if the market is totally desensitized to proof? Like, what if they've seen every doctor, every expert, every celebrity endorsement, and their eyes just glaze over?
That requires a completely different psychological lever. Instead of pulling them in with authority, you aggressively push them away using the market-oriented headline.
Push them away.
Yeah. This relies on the psychology of extreme qualification and tribal polarization. The example from the text is actually wild. Listen to this headline. Warning, do not read this if you have moral, ethical, or religious reasons against hurting someone who violently attacks you.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this one. Everything we were ever taught in Marketing 101 says you must lead with a benefit. You have to tell them what they're going to gain.
Right.
There's absolutely zero benefit in that headline. Why does pushing people away work?
It works because humans are deeply tribal creatures, and nothing creates tribal cohesion faster than a shared enemy or a shared boundary.
Okay.
When you say warning, do not read this if, you're doing two things. First, you're validating a very specific, intense worldview. The person who doesn't have moral objections to self-defense feels an immediate, visceral connection to that statement. It signals to their brain. This is for us, the realists, not for them, the weak.
Oh, wow. It's like the velvet rope outside an exclusive nightclub. The bouncer telling people they don't belong makes the people who do get inside feel incredibly important.
That is the perfect analogy. By explicitly repelling a certain type of person, you magnetically pull in the exact person you want. It's the ultimate anti-sales pitch, which paradoxically strips away the reader's defenses.
That is so counterintuitive, but brilliant.
Now, a close cousin to this is tapping directly into visceral emotion, specifically using the emotion headline.
How is that different?
This template skips cleverness entirely and just mirrors the prospect's darkest mood back to them. The example given is, warning, do not read this unless you are frustrated as hell with your golf swing.
Again with the warning trigger word. But here, instead of a moral boundary, it's just raw frustration.
Right.
It's identifying the crabgrass so perfectly that the golfer reads it and thinks, yes, I'm frustrated as hell. Finally, someone who actually gets it.
Validation is a required precursor to a sale. If someone feels deeply, accurately understood by you, their subconscious automatically assumes you possess the solution to their problem. You don't even have to prove you have the solution yet. The empathy does all the heavy lifting.
That is a golden rule right there. But let's look at the other extreme for a second. What if the prospect isn't frustrated and searching for answers? What if they already know exactly what they want and they are literally just waiting for the right opportunity to buy?
In that scenario, playing psychological games will actually hurt you. If you are selling water to a man crawling through a desert, you don't need a velvet rope or a tribal polarizing headline.
Right. You just need water.
You just need a big sign that says, ice cold water. That is the offer headline. The example in the text is super simple. Free fuel for a year with purchase of new car today only.
It's just a massive, undeniable bribe.
Exactly. It's designed for a starving crowd. It's a vital reminder that not every headline needs to be a psychological maze. If the market is acutely aware of their problem and actively seeking a solution, a massive, irresistible offer with a strict deadline is often the most elegant play.
Okay, so we have authority, polarization, raw emotion, and direct offers. But my absolute favorite psychological trick from the text is how we handle deeply entrenched beliefs.
Oh, this is a good one.
We all have assumptions about how the world works, right? To lose weight, you eat less fat. To win money, you bet on the fastest horse. How do you write a headline for someone whose beliefs are completely set in stone?
You have to break their mental model using cognitive dissonance. This is the contrast headline. It forces two completely opposing, contradictory ideas together to create intellectual friction.
Give me an example.
The examples from the text are brilliant. One is, beat the races by picking losers. And another is, how to lose weight by eating more of these fatty foods.
The brain physically recoils at that. It just doesn't make sense.
And then that is exactly why it works. When a headline directly contradicts a deeply held assumption, the brain experiences a glitch. It cannot process the paradox. And because the human brain hates unresolved tension, it demands an
Oh,
explanation.
they have to read it.
Yes, the only way to resolve that tension and return to a state of mental equilibrium is to stop scrolling and read the copy. You essentially trap them in a puzzle they are biologically forced to solve.
It's an itch they have to scratch. Okay, so those first few templates manipulate authority, boundaries, and assumptions. But the next grouping of formulas leverages what might be our deepest psychological blind spot of all, the information gap.
Oh, absolutely. The human mind is incredibly vulnerable to curiosity. The text references Scott Haynes, a highly successful copywriter who worked with massive names like J. Abraham. Haynes believed that curiosity is actually a stronger buying motive than actual desire.
That sounds insane to me. You're saying someone will pull out their credit card and buy something, not because they actually want the product, but just because they can't stand not knowing a secret.
I know it sounds nuts, but it happens every single day. Think about the tabloid headline template.
Okay.
You take your core claim and inject a bizarre, sensational twist into it. The text uses a legendary example written by John Carlton. Amazing secret discovered by one-legged golfer adds 50 yards to your drives, eliminates hooks and slices, and can slash up to 10 strokes from your game almost overnight.
See, a golfer would normally ignore an ad that just says, add 50 yards to your drive, because it's white noise. They've seen it in every single golf magazine.
Right.
But a one-legged golfer that is so hyper-specific and weird that it forces a pattern to interrupt.
Your visual cortex immediately tries to picture a man balancing on one leg, swinging a club, and somehow outdriving everyone on the course.
Oh.
It's an anomaly. Tabloids have survived for over a century at grocery store checkout lines because they understand this biological flaw. We are irresistibly drawn to the bizarre and the anomalous because our ancestors had to pay attention to anomalies in their environment to survive.
Which blends perfectly into the pure curiosity headline. The examples from the text, written by Mel Martin, are legendary in the copywriting world. What never to eat on an airplane, and bills, it's okay to pay late.
The mechanism there is pure anxiety disguised as curiosity. The headline introduces a gap between what the prospect currently knows and what they urgently need to know to avoid danger.
Yeah, if you are sitting in an airport terminal eating a sandwich and you read what never to eat on an airplane, your brain immediately panics. Wait, what did I just eat? What is the danger?
Exactly. The psychological discomfort can only be relieved by acquiring the missing information.
It is borderline manipulative, but undeniably effective. And just as a quick counterbalance to all this curiosity, the text also mentions the straight benefit headline, popularized by Eugene Schwartz. Get up to 12 miles more per gallon from your car. No tricks, no one-legged golfers, just hitting the absolute hottest button when a market is in acute pain, like during a gas crisis.
Clarity always trumps cleverness when the pain is high enough. And then you have the question headline. The text quotes copywriter Brian Keith Voiles, who states it is neurologically impossible to ignore a question about your own interests. Like, which of these health problems do you want to beat?
Why is a question more powerful than a statement, like mechanically?
A statement allows the reader's brain to remain passive. You can read a billboard that says, "We fix health problems," and just keep driving. But a question is a linguistic hook. Even if the prospect doesn't answer out loud, their subconscious mind immediately begins scanning their internal database for an answer.
Oh, I see.
By forcing their brain to participate in the dialogue, you have pulled them out of their internal world and actively engaged them in yours. You've initiated a two-way conversation without them even realizing it.
And of course, the final formula is the combine and conquer headline, where you just stack these triggers, combining proof and a question like, when doctors have headaches, what do they do? It implies a secret, uses authority, and demands an internal answer.
The overarching takeaway for all these formulas is that they are modular. They are essentially fill-in-the-blank tools to overcome writer's block. But, and this is a massive caveat, a curiosity headline about weed killer will always fail if the prospect only cares about crabgrass.
Right. The formula amplifies your message. It cannot replace the radical empathy required to find the right message in the first place.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the most practical part of this deep dive. We have the theory. We know how to map the prospect's emotional landscape with the 15 questions. We know how to pass the knock-knock test, and we have 10 architectural formulas to dress it up. But how does this inside their world empathy apply outside of just writing a sales page? How does this work in the messy reality of running a business?
The source material addresses this beautifully by taking these exact psychological principles and applying them to two distinct real-world scenarios. B2B networking through joint ventures, and diagnosing a failing product page through a copy critique.
Let's look at the joint ventures first, because anyone who has tried to build a business knows the brutal pain of cold outreach. A reader writes into the author saying they have a great product, but every time they try to partner with big-name marketers in their industry, they are completely ignored. Crickets.
It's so common.
And the author's solution is brilliant. He says, stop treating these partners like peers and start treating them exactly like prospects.
Because most people approach networking entirely backward. They send an email that says, look at my amazing product, look at my weed killer, I've spent 2 years building it, promote it to your massive audience for me.
Oh, the worst.
They send unsolicited links, they demand attention, and they apply immense pressure. They fail the very first rule of empathy.
Because they aren't thinking about the big-name marketer's crabgrass. What does a guru with a massive list actually care about? They don't care about your product. They care about their reputation. They care about not burning their audience with a bad recommendation. They care about their time.
Exactly. So the author advises a complete reversal of the approach. You remove all pressure and lower their defensive shields. You send a short message saying, do you do JVs with people who sell this type of product? I completely understand. If you're interested, I can send it over. No pressure either way.
No pressure either way. That phrase alone gives them an out.
It gives them agency. Furthermore, the advice is to start small. If you have no track record, don't pitch the biggest titan in your industry. Pitch someone with a similar-sized audience. Build a track record of mutual benefit. Generate social proof. It is the systematic application of understanding the other person's fears, specifically the fear of a bad endorsement, and mitigating that fear before you ever ask for a favor.
Now let's talk about the final case study, the copy critique, because this is where the theory turns into pure, undeniable strategy. The author critiques an eBay ad for an ebook by a guy named Greg Perry. The ebook is about how to sell guns and ammo in online auctions. The ad isn't terrible, but it's not converting well. And the author's diagnosis blew my mind because the core problem wasn't the words on the page, it was the fundamental positioning of the product itself.
This is such a crucial distinction. Copywriting is often misunderstood as mere wordsmithing, fixing grammar and making things sound punchy. But true copywriting is strategic business positioning.
Now, before we dive into the exact pivot the author suggests, let's set some context. We need to be super clear here that we are just looking at the marketing strategy objectively.
Right, 100%.
This source material uses the specific political and economic climate of 2009, specifically the election of Barack Obama and the subsequent recession, as the basis for this marketing pivot. It's a fascinating case study because, regardless of where anyone stands on the political spectrum, from a purely psychological standpoint, this marketer looked at the real-world anxieties of that specific year and asked, how do I align my product with the headlines my audience is already obsessing over?
That's the perfect way to frame it. We are looking at the architecture of a pivot. The author observed two things. First, the target demographic for this ebook, gun owners, had very acute, highly activated political anxieties at that time regarding the sitting president and potential legislation.
Right.
Second, there was a macroeconomic reality. Those exact anxieties were driving ammunition sales through the roof. Gun stores were completely backordered. It was a panic-driven boom market happening right in the middle of a massive national recession.
So the author looks at the ebook, which was currently being marketed as a simple how-to guide, basically, how to clear out your closet and sell your old hunting rifle online. And he says, stop selling convenience. The market doesn't care about convenience right now.
No, they don't.
He says to reposition the entire book as a biz-op, a business opportunity. Tap into the recession where people are terrified of losing their jobs and show them how to build a lucrative side hustle selling ammo in this booming, panic-driven market.
And the text literally advises the creator to tell the audience they can make money while, quote, sticking it to the gun-grabbing pinkos. Setting aside the specific rhetoric, look at the strategic maneuver. The product itself did not change. The PDF document remained exactly the same. But the angle of approach shifted entirely. It went from a utility product, clearing out a closet, to an identity-driven wealth creation product. It became a way to profit during a crisis while simultaneously fighting back against perceived cultural enemies.
It's incredible. Changing the angle to sync with current events was infinitely more powerful than just rewriting the headline. If you align with the zeitgeist, the copy almost writes itself.
It really does.
The critique also dives into some structural tweaks that I want to touch on before we run out of time. The author talks about speed bumps. What are those?
Speed bumps refer to the physical layout of the page. Many marketers believe that peppering testimonials throughout a sales letter builds constant reinforcing trust.
Yeah, that's standard advice.
But the author argues that a truly effective sales letter functions like a hypnotic narrative. It's a slippery slide. If the prospect is deeply engaged in the story, their critical mind is relaxed. If you suddenly break the flow of the text to insert a clunky block quote from Peggy Sue in Ohio praising your customer service, you jolt the reader out of the narrative. You literally break the trance.
That makes sense.
The advice is to move those testimonials to the sidebars or the postscript. Let them support the main column of text without physically interrupting the reader's eye path.
It's all about reducing friction. But the final piece of advice in the critique was the one that confused me the most initially. The product isn't selling well, so the author suggests raising the price. How does making something more expensive increase the conversion rate?
It relies on the psychology of perceived value, specifically what the author calls a reverse proof element. Imagine you have a book that promises to teach someone how to build a highly lucrative, recession-proof business that generates thousands of dollars a month. But the price tag is only $10. The prospect's brain immediately flags a discrepancy. If this information is so valuable, if it truly creates wealth, why are they practically giving it away? There must be a catch. It must be garbage.
The low price actually destroys the credibility of the big promise.
Precisely. By raising the price to $50 or $100, you align the cost with the perceived value of the outcome. The higher price tag subconsciously signals to the buyer that the information is premium, exclusive, and actually works, which paradoxically makes them trust the claims more.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of psychological territory today. From the 15 questions that map the darkest corners of a prospect's mind, to the door-to-door pressure of the knock-knock test, the 10 evolutionary headline formulas, and the macro-level positioning of an offer during a crisis. If we step back from all these tactics, what is the soul of this entire chapter?
If you synthesized everything we've discussed, the core insight is that profitable copywriting and, frankly, any effective form of persuasion is not an exercise in cleverness or literary skill. It is an exercise in radical empathy.
Radical empathy.
Yes. It is the systematic, deliberate process of understanding another human being's deepest anxieties, their unvoiced fears, and their most urgent desires. It's about presenting your solution directly inside their world. The goal is never to make them understand how smart you are. The goal is to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you completely understand them.
Instead of trying to be interesting, be intensely interested.
Exactly. And this brings us to a crucial cliffhanger. We've spent this entire time talking about the hook. You now have the psychological architecture to craft a headline that makes them stop dead in their tracks, interrupting their day and forcing them to look at your message.
Right?
But once you have their attention for that fleeting second, what exactly do you say in the very next sentence to ensure they don't click away? How do you transition from a shocking hook into a compelling narrative that pulls them effortlessly down the page? You'll have to join us on our next deep dive as we unpack the architecture of the Can't Ignore lead.
I cannot wait to get into that. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to chew on. Throughout this conversation, we've referenced print sales letters, eBay ads, and email copy. The examples feel rooted in a specific era of direct response. But remember, while the medium constantly shifts, human neurobiology hasn't changed in thousands of years.
That's the truth.
Think about how the knock-knock test or the curiosity headline applies to the content you consume and create right this very second. How might the psychology of the one-legged golfer change the way you script the first 3 seconds of your next TikTok or YouTube short? How might understanding someone's unvoiced humiliation change the way you pitch a new project in a Zoom meeting? Or even, how might this radical empathy change the way you prompt an AI to generate ideas for you? The platforms evolve, but the human brain remains the exact same. So go look at the next piece of content you're about to put out into the world and ask yourself, are you still monologuing about your weed killer, or are you finally ready to talk about their crabgrass?
What if the secret to getting anyone to, actually read your writing isn't about being clever or creative or writing something you think is just killer, but simply about knowing exactly what keeps your reader awake at night?
Oh, it completely flips the paradigm. Like, totally.
Yeah.
You go from trying to be this misunderstood artist, hoping someone out there appreciates your genius, to acting as a perfectly tuned mind reader who steps right into someone else's reality.
Yeah, and think about your own habits for a second if you're listening right now. You probably scroll past, I don't know, 100 brilliant, beautifully written articles every single day.
Oh, easily. Hundreds.
Right. They just blur together into this wall of noise. But then suddenly you stop dead in your tracks. You click on one specific headline because it feels like someone has literally been reading your diary.
Yes, it feels like it's speaking directly to your soul.
Exactly. And that single shift in perspective from look how smart my writing is to I know exactly what you're going through, that is the fundamental difference between content that gets completely ignored and content that drives massive engagement, loyalty, and ultimately sales.
Which is why today we are unpacking the mechanics of writing truly profitable headlines. We're starting with how to biologically synchronize with your market's deepest fears and desires, all the way to 10 foolproof frameworks you can use immediately.
Because for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
Mastering this skill is totally non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable, period. Because your headline is the ultimate gateway to every sale, click, or connection you will ever make.
If the gateway doesn't open, the rest of your work just doesn't
It's
exist.
invisible, yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into a masterclass in direct response copywriting today, pulling from the insights of Ben Settle. And the very first thing he does, which I love, by the way, is he takes a sledgehammer to this romanticized myth of the quote-unquote killer headline.
Oh, the Mad Men copywriter myth.
Yes. We all have this image of the guy staring out a window with a glass of scotch, waiting for a flash of poetic inspiration. But the reality presented here is shockingly mechanical, isn't it?
It is incredibly mechanical. He introduces this overarching framework for a profitable sales letter, and it's a rigid 5-part skeleton.
Right, which is, wait, let me make sure I have the list. It's headline, lead, story, bullets, close.
That's the one. And let's actually look at the architecture of that skeleton for a second, because understanding the whole body helps you understand why the headline matters so much.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So it mimics the natural progression of human persuasion. The headline is the filter that gets them to stop scrolling. The lead is the hook that proves they made the right choice by stopping.
Makes sense.
Then the story builds an emotional bridge of empathy. The bullets are the rapid-fire, rational justifications like the actual benefits. And finally, the close is the inevitable call to action.
So it's a machine. It's not about winning a Pulitzer Prize for literature.
Not at all. It's about guiding human psychology down a very specific, frictionless path.
And the first rule of that path, the first rule of the headline itself, is to basically forget trying to impress other writers. I love this point because it's such a massive ego check.
Oh, a huge ego check.
Because we're taught in school to, use an expansive vocabulary, to be poetic, to show off how well-read we are.
Right.
But in direct response, your solitary metric for success is whether you get the right person to actually read the first paragraph.
Right. You aren't writing to get a high five from your peers. The ego is the literal enemy of the copywriter.
Wow, the enemy.
Absolutely. Because when you write to be clever, you are inherently demanding that the reader pause, decipher your cleverness, and then congratulate you for it before they even know what you're offering.
You're making them work.
You are asking them to do work. And a distracted consumer owes you absolutely nothing. They don't want to do work. They want a solution to their immediate pain.
It totally reminds me of a master chef running a high-end kitchen. Like if a customer comes in absolutely exhausted after a brutal 14-hour workday, and they just want a perfect, comforting, classic cheeseburger.
You don't try to impress the other chefs in the kitchen by using weird molecular gastronomy.
Exactly. You don't serve them like a foam reduction of beef on a bed of dry ice just to prove your culinary prowess. You give the customer the perfect burger they are craving.
Because the point is to satisfy the customer, not to win an avant-garde culinary award. The molecular gastronomy is the perfect metaphor for a clever headline.
It looks great on a resume.
It does. But the exhausted customer, your prospect, is just going to stare at it, feel confused, and walk out the door to find a diner. They crave clarity over cleverness every single time.
But I have to jump in here, though, because if you're listening, you might be thinking what I'm thinking. Isn't a headline supposed to be kitschy?
Yeah.
But when we talk about grabbing attention at all costs, right, aren't we basically just describing clickbait? Because if there's one thing modern audiences are universally exhausted by, it's clickbait. We all hate being tricked.
That is a vital distinction. And blurring the two is a trap a lot of beginners fall into. Clickbait and direct response headlines might look like cousins on the surface, but they're actually psychological opposites.
Okay, how so?
Clickbait relies entirely on a bait and switch. It creates an artificial curiosity gap, something like, you won't believe what this child star looks like now. just to manufacture a cheap page view.
Right.
And then, crucially, it completely fails to deliver on the back end. The article is a letdown. Clickbait is a net designed to catch absolutely everyone, regardless of who they are, simply to harvest their attention for a split second.
It's a cheap trick. You click, you realize it's a generic listicle, and you just feel resentful for wasting your time.
Resentment is the exact word. Clickbait burns trust instantly. A true direct response headline, however, operates as a highly specific, highly calibrated filter.
A filter, okay.
Yeah, it makes a bold, hyper-specific promise that speaks only to a very particular reader's reality. It repels the people who aren't a good fit, and it magnetically attracts the people who are.
And I guess the rest of the copy actually fulfills the promise.
Exactly. The lead, the story, the bullets, they actually deliver what the headline promised. When you do that, you don't build resentment. You build instant credibility.
So, practically speaking, before you type a single word of your next project, you have to actively turn off the part of your brain that wants to sound like a genius. Your only goal is to make your specific target audience stop scrolling.
Right.
But to make them stop, you have to know them intimately. Settle says you have to get 1,000% in sync with the market.
1,000%. This is the diagnostic phase, and it is arguably where the actual writing happens. You cannot write a headline that works unless you have fully entered the prospect's world.
And the chapter provides this brilliant and frankly quite intense list of 15 questions you must answer about your market before you even pick up a pen.
They are intense.
Yeah, these questions go so much deeper than standard demographic surveys. We aren't just asking, what is their age and income bracket?
Right. Nobody cares about that in this phase.
Settle wants you to ask things like, what keeps them awake at night, staring at the ceiling? What are they deeply afraid of? What humiliates them?
Who are they furious with?
Yes. What do they worry about most? What are their core values? What are their political views? What religion are they?
Notice the emotional weight of those words, by the way. What humiliates them? That is a profoundly uncomfortable question to ask about a stranger.
It really is. We don't usually talk about humiliation in polite business settings.
No, we don't. But from a behavioral psychology standpoint, it gets to the absolute core of human motivation. Human beings are far more motivated to avoid pain, embarrassment, and loss than they are to acquire pleasure or gain.
Wow. So fear of loss over hope for gain.
Exactly. If you know what makes your prospect feel small, embarrassed, or humiliated, you hold the absolute key to their attention.
The text brings up this classic advertising adage to illustrate this point, and I love it so much. It says, don't tell me about your weed killer. Tell me about my crabgrass.
It's the perfect example.
Right, because we get so completely obsessed with the features of our own products. We want to shout, my weed killer has this revolutionary new chemical formulation. It's non-toxic, and it comes in an ergonomic recyclable bottle.
And the harsh truth is, the consumer does not care about your bottle.
Nope.
They don't care about your chemical formulation.
They care about the fact that it's Saturday morning, their neighbor's judging them, and they have the ugliest lawn on the entire block. They care about the embarrassment. They care about the crabgrass.
Yes. When you talk about the weed killer, you are selfishly demanding that the consumer drop what they are doing and enter your world. You are asking them to care about your business.
Which they don't.
Which they never will. But when you talk about the crabgrass, you are doing the hard work of entering their world. You are meeting them exactly where their pain lives.
I do want to question the depth of some of these 15 diagnostic questions, though. I mean, I get why asking about their fears or what humiliates them is useful. That totally tracks with the crabgrass thing.
Okay, what's your concern?
Well, what about the demographic stuff? Settle explicitly asks about their political views and religion. If I'm selling a software tool or a fitness program or, let's say, a product to help fix a golf swing, why on earth do I need to know their religion or political leanings? Isn't that irrelevant or even super risky?
It definitely seems risky on the surface. But it is absolutely essential for creating that frictionless communication we talked about earlier.
Okay, explain that.
Knowing those deeper psychographic and cultural details isn't about bringing politics or religion directly into your sales pitch. You're not selling politics. It's about mapping their worldview so you can adopt their exact vocabulary.
Oh, I see.
It dictates the metaphors you choose, the cultural touchstones you reference, the authorities you cite, and the underlying values you align with.
Take that golf swing product and paint a picture for me. How does that actually change the writing?
Sure. Let's imagine two completely different avatars who both desperately want to fix their golf swing. Avatar A is a retired, conservative, deeply religious executive living in the American South. He plays in a historic country club.
Okay. Very clear picture.
Now, Avatar B is a 28-year-old liberal tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who plays at a trendy, neon-lit indoor simulator.
Also a very clear picture.
Right. They both have a terrible slice they want to fix, but their values are universally different. If you use the casual, disruptive, slang-heavy language of the tech bro to try and sell the product to the retired Southern executive, you create massive subconscious friction.
Oh, you completely violate his expectations of respect and tradition.
Exactly. You break the sync.
Ah, I get it now. It's not about saying buy this because of your politics. It's about ensuring the tone of the room feels like home to them. You want them to read the copy and subconsciously think, this person speaks my language. This person is one of my tribe. They get me.
That unspoken trust is the foundation of every single sale. When you understand their entire ecosystem, who they are furious with, what their values are, how they view the world, you don't have to guess what will grab their attention. You already know what moves them.
So, the immediate practical application for you listening, you need to create a crabgrass avatar for your customer.
Yes, write it down.
Before you ever write a single bullet point about your product's features, sit down and write out their top 3 deepest frustrations, their midnight terrors, and the things that humiliate them in front of their peers. Build that profile out completely.
Because once you have that, you are ready to execute what the text calls the knock-knock strategy.
Oh man, this strategy. This is one of the most powerful visualization exercises in the entire field of copywriting.
It really is. It was supposedly invented by an old-school ad agency, and it forces you to figure out what you actually need to say in your headline to survive the harshest environment imaginable.
Picture this scenario if you're listening. Imagine you are selling your product entirely door-to-door.
The hardest way to sell.
Exactly. There is no internet, no social media algorithms to magically find your audience, no automated email funnels. You are physically walking up the sidewalk to a house where you know your ideal prospect lives. You have your heavy briefcase. You walk up the steps. You knock on the door opens.
And you have to assume the person opening that door is incredibly busy, they're highly skeptical, and their immediate reflex is to slam the door right in your face.
Exactly. They have their hand actively on the doorknob. What is the one single sentence you can say to the person standing there, knowing all their specific problems, fears, and desires from those 15 questions you just answered? That makes it biologically impossible for them to slam the door.
What specific combination of words makes them physically step back, open the door wider, and invite you inside their home to hear more?
The brilliance of this exercise is that it ruthlessly strips away all the fluff, doesn't it?
Completely. It forces you to distill your entire value proposition into a single high-impact emotional hook. You don't have time to ramble. You don't have time to be clever or poetic. You literally have 5 seconds before the door shuts forever.
Let's look at the incredible example provided in the chapter to see this in action. Let's say you are selling a premium health supplement.
Okay.
Through your diagnostic questions, you've realized your target market isn't just generic men. It's aging, type A weekend warriors.
Right.
These are guys who play hard, they are competitive, they've deeply held fantasies about being tough guys, and maybe they even harbor a little regret about never joining the military.
A very common demographic.
Right, but reality is catching up with them. They are secretly terrified of heart disease, their cholesterol is creeping up, they suffer from brain fog at work, and their knees ache every single morning.
That is a very specific, highly emotionally charged avatar.
So here is the knock-knock sentence designed specifically for that guy standing in the doorway. Ready?
Let's hear it.
World's leading military combat instructor declassifies the secret supplement used by the Navy SEALs to battle pain, injury, body fat, and cardiovascular health problems.
Man, if you dissect that sentence word by word, it is an absolute masterclass in psychological stacking. It is an unslammable door pitch.
Let's pull it apart for the listeners.
Yeah.
Why does that specific string of words freeze that guy in his tracks?
Because it hits 3 distinct, immensely powerful psychological triggers simultaneously. First, it hits his identity.
The military stuff.
Right. The phrase invokes a world's leading military combat instructor and Navy SEALs. This appeals directly to his inner tough guy fantasy and his inherent respect for elite masculine authority. He wants to associate himself with that level of performance.
Makes total sense. What's the second trigger?
Second, it triggers deep curiosity. Words like declassifies and secret supplement suggest hidden, restricted knowledge. Human beings have an insatiable drive to uncover secrets.
We all want the inside scoop.
Exactly. And third, it targets his deep pain points. It doesn't just say get healthy. It explicitly lists pain, injury, body fat, and cardiovascular health problems. It names the exact 4 horsemen of aging that keep him awake at night.
Imagine the alternative. If you just walked up to that door and said, "Hi, I have a great new supplement that helps lower cholesterol and joint pain," the door shuts in your face instantly.
It's boring. It's medical.
But because you synchronized with his identity, spiked his curiosity, and called out his specific pain, his brain cannot let you walk away. He has to hear the rest of the story.
So the exercise for the listener is to literally write out your own knock-knock sentence. If you only had 5 seconds face-to-face with your ideal customer, what specific combination of identity, curiosity, and pain would freeze them? That raw sentence is the clay you will use to sculpt your final headline.
Okay, so the knock-knock exercise gives us the what. We have the raw material. Now we need to understand the how. How do we actually structure those words for maximum impact?
Yeah.
And this is where the text transitions from theory into hard tactics, providing 10 foolproof headline frameworks.
Yes, the 10 frameworks. Let's group these logically, starting with what we might call the trust and threat frameworks. That would be proof, market-oriented, and emotion.
Okay, let's start with proof.
The proof headline is foundational. It relies heavily on a principle popularized by the legendary copywriter Gary Bencivenga. Adding a highly credible source or an undeniable element of proof to your promise will almost universally increase your response rate.
We actually just saw this in the Navy SEAL example, right?
Exactly. If the headline just promised how to combat pain and body fat, it's a weak, generic claim. We've heard it a million times. But anchoring that claim to Navy SEALs, an elite, undeniably fit group of people, makes the wild claim suddenly feel plausible.
Because the environment we operate in today is defined by extreme skepticism.
Oh, absolutely. Consumers are bombarded with thousands of massive, exaggerated claims every single day. Their default setting is to not believe a single word you say.
So the only reliable antidote to that level of ingrained skepticism is third-party proof. You have to borrow credibility from a recognized authority to give your claim weight.
Right. Now, moving from trust to threat, we have the market-oriented headline. This framework is fascinating because it breaks a lot of traditional rules.
It does. It often doesn't even make a promise or state a benefit at all. It simply calls the audience out directly and often aggressively.
The example provided is wild.
It is. It goes, "Warning, do not read this. If you have moral, ethical, or religious reasons against hurting or even killing someone who violently attacks you."
I mean, the sheer brilliance of that headline lies in how it functions as a polarizing filter. It is actively designed to repel the wrong people.
If you are a pacifist or you're just someone looking for a mild fitness class, you read that, you're immediately offended or turned off, and you leave.
And that is exactly what the writer wants. But if you are a person looking for serious, devastating, no-nonsense self-defense, that headline pulls you in like a tractor beam.
By alienating the people who don't fit, it implicitly tells the target audience, this is the real deal. This is for the hardcore.
And we have to talk about the very first word of that headline, which bridges us right into the emotion headline framework. That word is warning.
Yes. Another example given is warning. Do not read this unless you are frustrated as hell with your golf swing.
When we talk about biologically synchronizing with your market, the word warning is a literal cheat code. It acts as a biological pattern interrupt.
How so?
From a purely evolutionary standpoint, human beings are hardwired to pay attention to threats and warnings. It's a survival mechanism. Our brains prioritize threat detection above almost every other cognitive function.
So we can't help it.
Right. When your eyes scan the word warning, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, fires up involuntarily. You biologically cannot ignore it until you have quickly assessed whether the threat applies to your survival or well-being.
It bypasses logic entirely. Your brain goes, am I frustrated as hell with my golf swing? Yes. Okay, this warning applies to me. I must read the rest of this to ensure I'm safe.
It's almost unfair how effectively it hijacks attention.
So if you are listening to this and you feel like your content is just being completely ignored, try adding a warning or a highly specific, polarizing call out to the top of your next piece. Don't be afraid to actively repel the wrong audience to intensely attract the right one.
But what happens if your audience isn't actively looking for a solution? What if they aren't frustrated but simply bored?
Right, you can't rely on the amygdala forever.
Exactly. You have to trigger a different neurological system, which brings us to the next grouping of frameworks, the psychological itch. This covers curiosity, tabloid, and question headlines.
We touched on curiosity with the declassified example, but the text goes much deeper here. It quotes the master copywriter, Scott Haynes, who makes a staggering claim. He says curiosity is actually the #1 reason people buy, even more powerful than desire or self-interest.
It sounds counterintuitive until you look at the neurology. Curiosity creates a literal itch in the brain, driving what psychologists call a dopamine loop.
A dopamine loop.
Yeah, when we are presented with a gap in our knowledge, especially about something that feels relevant, hidden, or potentially dangerous, our brain releases dopamine. This chemical compels us to seek the answer, to close the loop and relieve the tension. We become obsessed with finding the missing puzzle piece.
The classic example provided here is from Mel Martin, who is famous for these types of headlines. He wrote, "What never to eat on an airplane."
That is infuriatingly brilliant.
It really is, because if you travel at all, the moment you read that, you suddenly feel this urgent, inescapable need to know. Have I been eating the wrong thing all these years? Is it toxic? Is it handled poorly? You have to know the answer.
It's a masterful combination. It introduces a subtle threat to your well-being, but completely hides the solution behind a heavy curtain of curiosity. You cannot resolve the anxiety without reading the copy.
Which flows perfectly into the tabloid headline framework.
Yeah.
Now, this is about taking the factual elements of your product and adding a sensational, story-driven twist.
Right.
The legendary example here is from John Carlton. Amazing secret discovered by one-legged golfer adds 50 yards to your drives. Now, I have to be honest. When people hear the word tabloid, their minds immediately go to the checkout aisle at the grocery store.
Oh, for sure. Alien babies and trashy rumors.
Exactly. So doesn't utilizing a tabloid framework mean we are basically just being sleazy or outright lying to our prospects?
It is a very common and totally valid concern, but we have to synthesize the stark difference between sensationalizing and fabricating.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Fabricating is lying. It is unethical, it destroys trust, and it will eventually ruin your business, period. Sensationalizing, however, within the context of direct response, simply means taking the most bizarre, fascinating, unusual, yet absolutely truthful detail of your product's backstory and shining a massive spotlight on it.
So in Carlton's famous ad, the golfer in the story truly, factually, had only one leg.
Exactly. The man actually had one leg, and because of his physical limitation, he actually had to figure out a unique balance technique, and that technique actually added 50 yards to his drive. All of those are verifiable facts.
That's a wild.
Right. A boring corporate writer would look at those facts and write a headline that says, "Learn a new balance technique for a longer drive." It's true, but it puts you to sleep.
Yeah, nobody's clicking that.
But Carlton, utilizing the tabloid framework, mines the story for the most sensational, attention-grabbing truth, the fact that the instructor only has one leg and leads with it. It's not sleazy if it's true, and it delivers immense value. It is simply elite storytelling.
That is a profound shift in perspective. Dig through the history and backstory of whatever you are selling. Find the weirdest, most unusual, most unexpected true detail, and put it right at the front of your headline.
Absolutely. And if you want to dial back the sensationalism, you can use the question headline framework, for example. Which of these health problems do you want to beat?
Ah, right.
The question headline leans right back into that dopamine loop we discussed. From a cognitive standpoint, it is nearly impossible to ignore a question that is relevant to you. If I ask you a direct question, your brain automatically, involuntarily begins searching your memory and feelings for the answer.
Furthermore, framing your hook as a question removes the aggressive sales pitch vibe entirely. It lowers the prospect's defenses because it doesn't feel like you are pushing an agenda. It feels like you are respectfully inviting them into a dialogue.
It gives the reader agency. Which of these do you want to beat? You are letting them choose their own adventure.
But what if you don't need a psychological labyrinth? What if the market is already hungry?
Well, that leads us to the final grouping of frameworks, the straight shooters. These are the offer, the contrast, and the straight benefit headlines.
Sometimes the most sophisticated thing you can do is just get out of your own way.
Amen to that. The offer headline is designed for audiences that already have a high level of market awareness and already know they want the item. The example is simply free fuel for a year with purchase of new car.
Right. If I am actively shopping for a car and gas prices are high, I don't need a tabloid story about a one-legged mechanic. I don't need an amygdala hijacking warning. I just want the best deal. If the desire is already burning, just put the meat on the table.
Exactly. Then you have the contrast headline, which is slightly more complex. This involves marrying two opposing, seemingly contradictory ideas to force engagement.
Give us an example.
The examples are things like beat the races by picking losers or how to lose weight by eating more of these fatty foods.
The mechanism driving this is cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
Precisely. The human brain demands logical resolution. When it is presented with two concepts that fundamentally shouldn't go together, like the idea that eating fat could result in losing weight, which contradicts decades of dietary dogma, the brain spots the glitch in the matrix.
It says, wait, that is physically impossible. You must explain to me how that works.
Exactly. It forces the reader to engage through sheer confusion and the desperate desire for clarity.
And if you want to bypass confusion entirely, you use Eugene Schwartz's famous method, the straight benefit headline. You just state the massive overarching benefit with absolutely no messing around. Get up to 12 miles more per gallon from your car.
When the problem your market is facing is an urgent, hot-button crisis, a straight benefit acts as a beacon of hope in the dark. You don't need to dress it up with cleverness or curiosity. The pain is so acute that the solution itself is the ultimate hook.
Which brings us to framework number 10, the combine and conquer headline. This is where you start mixing and matching the previous 9 frameworks to create a multi-layered net.
Yes. You can take a proof headline and smash it together with a question headline. The example is, when doctors have headaches, what do they do?
That is a beautifully engineered sentence. It combines the undeniable third-party credibility of medical doctors with the unavoidable neurological itch of a question.
When you are stuck, combining two different headline types gives you a significantly higher probability of catching the reader's attention, simply because you are engaging multiple psychological triggers simultaneously. You are casting a wider, yet still highly specific, net.
So we have spent a lot of time in the theory and the frameworks. But what I love about this chapter is that it brings all of this down to earth with a massive real-world case study.
Yes, the guns galore critique.
Right. It provides a detailed critique of an actual underperforming eBay ad for an ebook called Guns Galore, written by a guy named Greg Perry. The original ad was struggling to get any traction, so the author steps in and suggests a series of massive strategic shifts.
It is a phenomenal look at how market positioning dictates success far more than the actual words on the page. The original ad was positioned as a basic, straightforward how-to manual. It essentially said, here is how you legally buy and sell guns and ammo online. It was treating the product as a static tool. But the author realizes that they are completely ignoring the massive macro environment of the time.
Context is everything here. And before we dive into this, we need to make something explicitly clear. The author points out that this critique was written around 2009. Obama had recently become president. And within a very specific demographic in the United States, there was a massive, palpable fear of impending gun regulations and bans.
Right. And just to pause here, we are looking at this purely as analysts.
Exactly. We are absolutely not taking a political stance on gun control, Obama, or left-wing versus right-wing politics.
Not at all. We're impartially looking at the marketing mechanics presented in the source material. It's about observing how a marketer identified a massive wave of public anxiety and aligned a product with it.
Well said. So this intense fear in 2009 was driving up the sales of firearms and ammunition exponentially. Shelves were empty, and products were on back order everywhere. So the author's primary suggestion is a total repositioning. Don't just sell this as a how-to book. Frame it as a highly lucrative business opportunity.
The lesson here is about trend jacking. It is about actively aligning your product with whatever macroeconomic or social currents your target audience is currently obsessed with or fearful of.
If your target market is terrified of incoming regulations and they are simultaneously witnessing massive ammo shortages and price gouging, you don't just sell them a boring manual, you sell them a timely, urgent opportunity to create a lucrative side business during an unprecedented boom market.
It elevates the perceived value of the product exponentially. It transforms it from a mere informational tool into a potential financial lifeline. And to capitalize on that, the author also suggests aggressive market segmentation.
Oh, right. Instead of running one broad headline hoping to catch everyone, you run multiple different headlines, each targeting a different specific demographic within that broader market.
They give a great parallel example about marketing a business acquisition course. Instead of just saying how to buy a business, they tested highly segmented headlines like how to buy a vending machine business versus how real estate investors can buy a business.
The more you segment your audience, the higher your chances of achieving that deep 1,000% sync we talked about at the very beginning.
And perhaps the most mind-bending suggestion in the entire critique is regarding pricing psychology.
Oh, this blew my mind.
The original Guns Galore ebook was priced at a very affordable $9.95. The author looks at that and suggests raising the price significantly to $29, $39, or even $79.
When I first read that, it felt completely backwards. If the book isn't selling, you lower the price, right? This basic supply and demand.
That's what everyone thinks. But the author introduces this concept of reverse proof.
Reverse proof.
Yeah. If you are promising me that this book contains the blueprint to build a highly lucrative, recession-proof side business in a booming market, and you are only charging me $10 for it, my brain immediately registers a disconnect.
I'm going to assume the information is generic, easily accessible garbage.
Because price inherently communicates value. We rely on price as a cognitive shortcut to judge quality.
Right, think about a real-world scenario. If a stranger on the street walks up and offers to sell you a brand new, supposedly authentic Rolex watch for $20.
Your first thought isn't, wow, what an incredible financial opportunity.
Not at all. Your immediate thought is, this is a fake and this person is trying to scam me.
The low price destroys the credibility of the offer. By drastically raising the price of the ebook, you actually increase the perceived authority and credibility of the information inside it.
So the practical takeaway for you listening, looking at your own business, take a hard look at your current price point. Is it possible that your price is so low that you're actually hurting your own credibility? Are you triggering reverse proof?
It's a scary thought, but a crucial one.
And second, how can you reframe your product or service right now? Not just as a static tool, but as a timely, urgent opportunity based on the current events, anxieties, or trends happening in your specific market today.
That holistic view of marketing leads us perfectly into the final key idea from the chapter. This section addresses a different kind of headline entirely, but one that is absolutely crucial for growth.
Oh, the email subject line for joint ventures.
Yes, the mailbag section, the eternal question of how to get the big names, the massive gurus with lists of hundreds of thousands of buyers, to actually open your email and promote your product.
And the secret revealed here is shockingly simple, yet the author notes that almost everyone gets it completely wrong.
Everyone gets it wrong because they approach the interaction from a place of desperation and high pressure. The standard amateur move is to send a long, unsolicited email with a PDF or a link to their product attached, basically begging the guru to look at their killer new thing and share it with their list.
The text is definitive on this. Do not send unsolicited products, ever.
It is the fastest way to get marked as spam.
Instead, you have to respect their time, treat them like the busy professional they are, and ask an incredibly simple, pressure-free question first. Something along the lines of, do you do JVs with people who sell products in the X space?
The psychology behind that short question is brilliant because it explicitly asks for permission to enter their world. It completely removes the burden of obligation from the recipient.
If they say no or they ignore it, fine.
Right. But if they reply and say yes, they have actively opted in to receiving your pitch. You are no longer an annoying salesperson shouting through their mail slot. You are an invited guest stepping through the front door.
And the chapter outlines this broader strategy of social proof laddering. You don't start your JV journey by emailing the biggest, most famous guru in the world. They will ignore you because you have no proof of concept.
You build your foundation first. You cross-promote with someone who is exactly your own size. If you have an email list of 200 people, you find someone else in an adjacent niche with a list of 200 people. You do a joint venture, you get results.
Then, you use the success of that campaign as social proof to approach someone with a list of 500 people. You show them the data, you climb the ladder rung by rung.
It treats the entire networking process as a peer-to-peer relationship, building a solid, undeniable foundation of credibility before you ever attempt to reach out to the heavy hitters.
Okay, we have covered an absolutely massive amount of ground today. We've dismantled the romantic myth of the killer headline and replaced it with a mechanical 5-part skeleton.
We did.
We've explored the uncomfortable depths of the 15 diagnostic questions, visualized the pressure cooker of the door-to-door knock-knock strategy, and walked through all 10 foolproof frameworks, from the amygdala hijacking warning to the dopamine-fueled curiosity hook.
The full spectrum.
We analyzed the macroeconomic repositioning of Guns Galore, the counterintuitive nature of pricing psychology, and the permission-based secret to landing massive joint ventures. When you look at all these moving parts, all these psychological triggers, what is the grand synthesis here? What is the core truth tying all of this together?
If there is a single soul to this entire chapter, it is the profound realization that a truly successful headline actually has nothing to do with you, your cleverness, or even your product.
Wait, nothing to do with your product.
Basically nothing. A great headline is simply a perfectly polished mirror. When you apply these frameworks and when you do the exhausting work of digging into those 15 deeply uncomfortable psychographic questions, you aren't trying to show the prospect how great your offer is.
You're just holding up the mirror.
You are holding up a mirror and reflecting their own deeply held fears, their hidden desires, and their daily agonizing realities back at them. You are reflecting their internal world so accurately and with such intimate precision that they physically have no choice but to stop, read, and step inside to find the solution you are holding.
A perfectly polished mirror. That is a brilliant way to frame it. When they look at your writing, they shouldn't see your ego. They should see their own reflection.
Spot on.
Well, thank you for joining us on this exhaustive deep dive into the true mechanics of human attention. But before we go, I want to leave you with something to chew on. Next time you are scrolling through your feed and you find yourself suddenly magnetically clicking on a link, pause for a second.
Yeah, ask yourself why.
Exactly. Ask yourself, did I click on this because I genuinely wanted to? Or did I click because the writer knew exactly what I was afraid of?
Then you see the strings, you never look at the internet the same way again.
You really don't. Now that you know exactly how to get your prospect to open the door and invite you in, you have to know exactly what to say to keep them from kicking you out. Which is exactly why next time, we'll be unraveling the secrets of the can't ignore lead. You have exactly one sentence to stop someone from walking away. I mean, just one sentence to turn a casual scroller into a captivated audience. And if you fail, the rest of your brilliant pitch, your life-changing product, or your masterful argument, it simply ceases to exist.
Right. It is the ultimate bottleneck of human communication. It's that singular moment where the bridge is either built or the reader just vanishes forever. We lose the vast majority of our audience before we even get to, clear our throats.
And that is the exact tension we are exploring today. I mean, we obsess over the headline, right? We spend hours crafting the perfect subject line, the perfect thumbnail.
The perfect bait.
Exactly, the bait, just to get someone to click or look. But the actual war for human attention, it isn't won at the click. It is won or lost in the very next paragraph. The lead. The headline gets them to the door, sure, but the lead is the psychological hook that drags them inside and locks the deadbolt. If you do not set that hook immediately, they are gone. And all your hard work on the rest of the message is completely wasted.
Yeah, the headline buys you a maximum of, 3 seconds of goodwill? The reader glances at your opening line, and their brain is running this highly ruthless subconscious calculation like, is the energy required to read this going to give me an immediate payoff?
Right.
The lead paragraph has to answer that question with an overwhelming yes. It's the transition from merely viewing a page to actively entering a hypnotic state of reading.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is pulling back the curtain on how to engineer that exact hypnotic state. We're pulling our insights from Chapter 3 of Ben Settle's book, Copywriting Secrets. And just to be crystal clear right out of the gate, because, I know what year it is, when we say crypto here, we are absolutely not talking about Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Web3. We mean crypto in the classic sense of the word. Cryptic, hidden.
Yeah.
The underground psychological triggers that drive human behavior.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that's a vital distinction. We are looking at the foundational architecture of persuasion, not blockchain technology. We're talking about the hidden mechanisms of the human mind. The lead is the critical bridge between getting someone to look and getting someone to stay.
Over the course of this deep dive, you are going to learn how to craft opening sentences that literally lock in human attention using candor, curiosity, and honestly even shock. We're going to explore the grueling mechanical editing process required to polish those words until they flow like water. And we'll tear down real-world examples to see how to maintain a reader in an unbreakable trance.
Which is huge.
It is. This matters deeply to you because whether you're an entrepreneur writing an email, an employee pitching a project to your boss, or just someone trying to sell a physical product online, mastering the lead is the single most powerful shortcut to becoming undeniably persuasive.
The lead is the filter. It separates the people who are just making noise from the people who actually command authority. I mean, in a world drowning in infinite distractions, commanding focus is the absolute most valuable skill you can possess.
So let's get into the mechanics of commanding that focus. Let's say you have their attention for those crucial 3 seconds. The natural instinct for almost everyone in business is to instantly validate why they deserve that attention, right?
Oh, totally. We puff out our chests.
Yeah, we list our awards, our degrees, our years of experience. We try to build this like fortress of authority. But Settle introduces a concept called the candor lead, which does the exact opposite. And it feels almost suicidal to a traditional marketer.
It really does. The candor lead is a masterpiece of psychological judo.
Hmm.
To understand why it works, you have to understand the cognitive environment of your reader. We live in an ecosystem of hyper-exaggeration.
Everything is the best ever.
Right. Every software tool is revolutionary. Every diet is a miracle.
Yeah.
Every financial newsletter is the secret Wall Street doesn't want you to know. Consumers are not just skeptical anymore, they are actively fortified against marketing language. They've got the sophisticated radar system designed to detect and block self-serving claims.
We're totally numb to the hype. When someone says they're the best in the world, our brain immediately translates that to, oh, they're trying to sell me something, ignore them.
Exactly. Therefore, the most jarring, pattern-interrupting thing you can possibly do in that environment is to lead with a glaring negative. You deliberately expose a flaw, a limitation, or a complete lack of traditional authority. You confess something that, on the surface, seems to disqualify you.
Settle highlights this legendary example of this from Gary Halbert, who is, one of the most famous direct response copywriters in history. He wrote an ad called Betty's Diet Book. And instead of leading with some breakthrough medical science, he opens the ad like this. Quote, "My name is Betty Adams, and the first thing you should know about me is I am not a doctor. I'm not an expert on nutrition either. I never went to college, and I don't have a degree in anything. In fact, the only thing I consider myself an expert about is," end quote.
It's brilliant.
That is wild to me.
Yeah.
The diet book. The entire billion-dollar weight loss industry is built on lab coats, clinical trials, and people parading their complex nutritional science. And Betty Adams just walks into the room, sits down, and says, yeah, I have absolutely none of that.
Think about the immediate cognitive relief the reader experiences there. The reader's brain was bracing for a complex, highly medicalized sales pitch. They were preparing to defend themselves against a doctor telling them they are unhealthy.
Right, their guard is up.
Their guard is totally up. Instead, they encounter someone actively tearing down their own pedestal. This triggers a very specific psychological heuristic regarding costly signaling.
Okay, costly signaling. How does that apply here?
So in evolutionary psychology, a costly signal is a behavior that is hard to fake because it carries a genuine risk. Admitting you have no formal education when you're trying to sell an informational book is a massive risk. The reader's subconscious registers this and concludes, wow, this person is taking a risk by being honest about their shortcomings. Therefore, they must not be trying to deceive me. They have no hidden agenda.
Oh, wow.
Right. By volunteering information that seemingly damages your credibility, you actually establish an incredibly deep, unshakable well of trust.
It's almost like a first date. If someone sits down and immediately says, I have to confess, I'm incredibly nervous right now, you instantly trust them more than the person bragging about their accomplishments.
Perfect analogy. But wait, doesn't this risk making the reader think you have no idea what you're talking about? I mean, if I'm hiring a plumber, I don't want the candor lead. I don't want him saying, I've never seen a pipe before.
Well, context matters, obviously. But admitting a lack of formal credentials in these specific types of markets actually makes everything else you say more believable. Because if you are ruthlessly honest about your flaws, the reader assumes you will be equally honest about the strengths of whatever you are proposing.
That is the subconscious leap. If Betty admits she isn't a doctor, then when Betty tells me this weird routine helped her lose weight, she must be telling the truth about that too.
Exactly. It strips away the polished, artificial salesman persona and replaces it with the persona of a trusted, vulnerable friend who is just confiding in you. Settle shows how he adapted this exact framework for a dog medicine product. He wrote an opening that said, quote, "My name is Steve Habib, and the first thing you should know about me is I am not a veterinarian. I'm not an expert in dog medicine either. I never went to college, and I don't have a degree in anything even remotely related to dogs."
It's the exact same architecture. And there is an added layer of brilliance here, specifically for health or remedy markets. People seeking a new diet or an alternative dog medicine are usually doing so because the traditional experts have failed them.
Well, that's so true. They've already tried the normal route.
Right. They have been to the expensive doctors,
Wow.
they have paid the high vet bills, and the problem still exists. So the traditional authority is actually a point of friction for them. Hearing from someone who explicitly states, I am not one of those experts who let you down, is deeply appealing. It signals, I'm an outsider just like you, and I had to figure this out the hard way.
So if I'm listening to this, I'm preparing a pitch for tomorrow. The practical takeaway here isn't to necessarily hide my resume, but to proactively diffuse the biggest objection in the room. Like, if I'm a tiny startup pitching a massive enterprise client, I shouldn't try to pretend I have a skyscraper full of employees.
No, absolutely not.
I should walk in and say, we are a team of 4 people. We don't have a massive support department, and we don't have a shiny corporate headquarters. By owning the negative, I completely disarm their ability to use it against me.
You steal their ammunition, and in doing so, you force them to focus entirely on the actual value of your idea, rather than the superficial trappings of your authority. You are saying, I have nothing to hide. It is a display of supreme confidence disguised as vulnerability.
Okay, so candor lowers the shields. It disarms the reader's natural skepticism. But simply being honest doesn't inherently make someone want to keep reading.
Yeah.
If I walk up to you and honestly confess that I don't know how to play the piano, you might trust me, but you aren't going to stick around for an hour to hear more about it. How do we transition from just lowering their defenses to actively pulling them into the message?
That brings us to the most primal biological driver of human attention curiosity. Once the shield of skepticism is lowered, you have to introduce a neurological itch. Master copywriter Scott Haynes, whose subtle references, makes a really profound observation here. He states that curiosity, not desire, and not even need, is the absolute #1 reason people buy.
More powerful than desire. This sounds counterintuitive. I mean, we are always taught to sell the benefits, to sell the dream.
Selling the dream works when they are already evaluating your product. But to get them to that point, to get them to read the second paragraph, you have to manipulate the brain's information-seeking systems. It's tied to the Zeigarnik effect in psychology, which dictates that human beings remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones.
Right.
When you present the brain with a specific gap in its knowledge, what we call an open loop, the brain perceives it as an anomaly. It creates this state of mild, unresolved tension. The brain just becomes fixated on closing that loop to restore equilibrium.
It's why we binge watch television shows.
Yes.
The episode ends on a cliffhanger, an open loop, and even though it's 2 a.m. and we're completely exhausted, we physically cannot stop ourselves from letting the next episode play. We just have to know what happens to the character.
Exactly. The did you know and question leads are designed to intentionally rip open these loops in the reader's mind right in the very first sentence.
Settle provides the gold standard example of this from Gary Bencivenga's famous Interviews That Win Jobs ad. Let's look at the sheer craftsmanship of these questions. The lead goes, do you know why you should never eat a spinach salad when you're being interviewed over lunch? If you're a man, do you know why you should never wear a gold bracelet to a job interview? If you're a woman, do you know the kind of blouse that makes interviewers of both sexes think you're a loser?
The architecture of those questions is just stunning. Notice what he does not ask. He doesn't ask, do you know how to dress for an interview? Or do you want to ace your next job interview? Those are closed loops.
Yeah, because the reader sees that and thinks, yes, I need to dress professionally. I know this already. The brain feels no tension, so it just moves on.
Exactly. But the spinach salad...
Here's where it gets really interesting. The spinach salad introduces a highly specific, seemingly arbitrary detail and connects it to a catastrophic consequence failing the interview. These aren't just random trivia. They are highly specific to the anxieties of the target market.
What's fascinating here is the psychology behind that anxiety. The target market for this ad is unemployed people, or people desperate for a career change. They are already swimming in baseline anxiety. Bencivenga takes that generalized fear and laser focuses it onto a specific mundane action.
It creates a sudden, sharp sense of danger. A reader thinks, wait, I eat salads at lunch all the time. Is this why I didn't get the call back last week? Am I sabotaging my career because of spinach?
Right. And because the detail is so hyper-specific, the reader cannot guess the answer. They cannot rationalize their way out of the tension. The only biological way to relieve the anxiety and close the loop is to keep reading. The question bypasses their conscious decision-making process and directly hacks their survival instincts.
It's practically weaponized. Settle also explores a variation of this that is much blunter, less of a riddle, and more of a direct, unavoidable hit to a painful reality. He cites the classic lead, do you have hemorrhoids? Or another one, if money were no object, would you own Encyclopedia Britannica? There's no clever spinach salad misdirection here. It's just a raw confrontation.
The "do you have hemorrhoids?" Lead works as a ruthless binary sorting mechanism. It is the ultimate filter. If a person reads that and the answer is no, they immediately leave the page. And that is a flawless outcome because you do not want to spend money or energy marketing a hemorrhoid cream to someone who doesn't have the problem. But if the answer is yes, you have instantly arrested their attention.
Because you've named the monster in the room.
You have articulated their secret acute pain. When the pain is that severe, you don't need clever riddles. The sheer recognition of the problem is the hook. They are thinking, yes, I have this terrible problem, and the fact that you are asking me means you might have the solution. The direct question proves you understand their reality.
So if I'm internalizing this from my own writing, the takeaway is that I can't just ask random trivia questions. I can't start an email with, did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?
Yeah.
Just to get an open rate, and then pivot to selling accounting software.
Oh, please don't do that.
Right. The question has to be inextricably linked to the specific anxieties, hidden pains, or deep, unfulfilled desires of the person reading it.
The disconnect between the hook and the payoff is where amateur copywriters fail. If you use clickbait trivia to open the loop, and then the text doesn't deliver a satisfying, relevant answer, you generate intense resentment. You train the reader to ignore your future emails. The question must challenge their specific worldview. It must make them question their current behavior. Never ask a question the audience can simply answer no to and walk away.
Okay, so candor gets them to drop their guard. Curiosity creates the biological itch that forces them to read the next paragraph. But curiosity alone doesn't build a logical case. You can't sustain a business purely on cliffhangers. I mean, eventually you have to transition from, I need to know what happens next, to, I actually believe that your product works. How do we move from pure psychological tension into the realm of logic and belief?
We do that by leveraging what legendary adman Eugene Schwartz called the architecture of built-in belief. This is the if-then-lead framework. It is a structural shift from raw emotion to conditional logic.
I love the examples Settle provides for this. They are so clean. Here's a baseline example from the text. If you would like to be a woman that nearly all men just can't resist, this is going to be the most important message you ever read. It's incredibly straightforward.
It is straightforward because it acts as a pacing mechanism. In hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, pacing is the act of matching the subject's current reality before leading them to a new reality. The if statement does exactly this. It forces the reader into a conditional sandbox. If you would like to be a woman that nearly all men just can't resist, it demands an internal, silent agreement from the target audience. The reader thinks, well, yes, I would like that.
It's like a combination lock. The if is entering the correct first number. You're stirring out everyone who doesn't care, so the then only hits the people who are practically begging for a solution. You aren't pushing a product. You are simply stating a logical condition based on their stated desire.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You are shifting the origin of the desire from the seller to the buyer. And Settle explores a variation of this structure that takes it a step further by adding a historical or geographical proof element to the then statement.
Right, let's look at that variation. It goes like this. If you would like to lose up to 63 pounds, then here is how I did it in Japan and why I think you can do it in America.
Let's dissect the profound shift in the burden of proof happening in that single sentence. Imagine a standard chest-thumping marketing claim like, I guarantee I can help you lose 63 pounds.
Immediate skepticism. My brain says, prove it. You don't know my metabolism? You don't know my habits. The burden of proof is entirely on you, the seller, to convince me about my own future.
Exactly, you have triggered their defense systems, but look at the architecture of the if-then proof variation. If you want to lose weight, you've got the internal yes. Then here is how I did it in Japan. Notice what happened. The seller is no longer making an aggressive, forward-looking promise about the buyer's body. They are simply stating a historical, autobiographical fact about an event that occurred in a distant location.
They're essentially saying, look, I'm not making any wild claims about you. I'm just going to tell you a story about what happened to me over in Tokyo. It completely bypasses the reader's sales radar because it feels like a documentary, not an infomercial.
It leverages the authority of distance and exoticism. Japan has a cultural association with health, longevity, and unique methodologies. By anchoring the claim in a specific location and framing it as a historical narrative, the logic implied is, this mechanism exists in the real world, it has already happened.
Settle provides another example of this using history instead of geography. If you would like to know a secret way to make yourself near invincible in a fight, then here's how ancient gladiators, samurai, and other deadly warriors in history did it. It's the same trick. You aren't saying, buy my DVD and you will become a street fighting master. You are saying, I have uncovered an academic historical fact about how samurai trained. People love forbidden knowledge. They love uncovering lost secrets.
It frames the transaction not as the hawking of a cheap commodity, but as the transmission of elite hidden wisdom. The word because, or the implicit logic of here is how they did it, satisfies the brain's need for rational justification, even when the underlying drive is purely emotional.
So if I'm putting this into practice tomorrow, the formula is highly structural. I teach the listener to explicitly name the ultimate desire of their audience in an if statement. If you want to double your inbound leads, and then I follow it immediately with a highly specific then promise. But I anchor that promise in an external piece of proof. Then here's the weird cold email sequence a small agency in London used to do exactly that.
You are creating a frictionless logical slide. Once they agree to the premise of the if, the structural gravity of the sentence pulls them inexorably down into the proof of the then.
Let's pivot from the psychological architecture of the sentence to the actual physical reality of a human being looking at a screen. I was looking at the notes on visual momentum, and I noticed Settle pushes for an approach that would make a high school English teacher have a heart attack. He advocates for paragraphs that are literally one sentence long, sometimes just 3 words. Isn't that technically terrible grammar?
It is atrocious traditional grammar, but it is flawless cognitive psychology. It is called the bite-sized lead, and it addresses a major physiological barrier to reading, which is cognitive load and visual inertia.
Let's unpack the biomechanics of that. What actually happens when we open an email?
When a reader opens an email or lands on a sales page, before they read a single word, their visual cortex scans the geometry of the text. They look at the density of the paragraphs. The brain is calculating the caloric energy, the cognitive load required to process that information. If they see massive, dense blocks of text stretching down the screen, the brain registers that as high effort. In a fraction of a second, the prefrontal cortex often decides, I don't have the energy for this right now, and the reader clicks away.
It's the intimidation factor of the wall of text. You open an email from a colleague, see 4 massive paragraphs with no line breaks, and you immediately flag it to read later, which, usually means never.
Precisely. The bite-sized lead physically dismantles that barrier. By using an extremely short 3 to 5 word sentence and isolating it as its own paragraph, you drastically lower the perceived cognitive load. Settle's examples are things like, I was the total skeptic, or recently I received a bizarre phone call.
Visually, there's almost nothing there. It's just a tiny string of characters surrounded by white space.
Because of how human eye tracking works, specifically the rapid eye movements called saccades, your eye naturally falls into that white space. The physical effort required to read those 4 words is lower than the physical effort required to move your mouse and click the back button. You essentially trick the brain into consuming the first sentence before it has even made the conscious decision to engage with the text.
You bypass the bouncer at the club because you look entirely unthreatening. And once they read, recently I received a bizarre phone call, the curiosity loop is opened. Now they have momentum. They are already sliding down the page. I can see the bite-sized lead working because it's so easy to read, but Settle contrasts this with a technique that seems designed to cause massive friction. He calls it the unlikely source lead.
Right. This relies on sheer shock value.
This is the one that really made me pause. Settle brings up Gary Halbert's The Crime Connection lead, which opens with, would you take investment advice from a drug dealer? And Settle shares his own adaptation for a self-defense product. Would you take fighting advice from a bloated, out-of-shape, and overweight criminal scumbag? Now, I understand pattern interrupts, but isn't this dangerous? We're so used to sanitizing our corporate communications to avoid offending anyone. If you drop the phrase bloated criminal scumbag into a pitch, aren't you going to cause a massive backlash? Isn't that deeply offensive to the reader?
It absolutely carries a risk, and that risk is the source of its power. You are intentionally weaponizing cognitive dissonance. Corporate sanitized marketing language is invisible. It washes over the reader without leaving a trace. When a reader encounters the phrase drug dealer or criminal scumbag in the context of an instructional or investment product, their brain screeches to a halt. It is a violent pattern interrupt. They literally cannot believe what they are reading.
It forces them to stop skimming.
Exactly. But it goes deeper than just shock value. It unpacks a highly compelling contradiction. If the advice you are selling is coming from someone so utterly repulsive, shady, or fundamentally flawed, the implicit message is that the advice itself must be almost dangerously effective.
It's the appeal of the dark arts. If they're a drug dealer, someone who operates completely outside the bounds of ethics and the law, someone whose literal survival depends on ruthless efficiency, is using a specific financial strategy, the reader assumes that strategy must be incredibly raw, unfiltered, and wildly profitable.
It strips away the polite, institutional veneer of Wall Street or traditional martial arts dojos. It frames the product as possessing a raw, forbidden power. It says, this mechanism is so fundamentally potent that even the worst people in society use it to succeed.
It's a fascinating paradox. You are repelling them morally, but attracting them pragmatically. The reader is forced to resolve that dissonance, and the only way to do that is to read the next paragraph to find out how and why this unlikely source has the answer.
It is curiosity amplified by moral shock. However, this is a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. It works specifically for products that can be positioned as ethical for the consumer to use, but that might be utilized by unsavory characters because of their sheer effectiveness. You must ensure that the payoff in the underlying story actually justifies the intense shock of the opening hook. Otherwise, you just come across as desperate for attention.
So we've spent all this time dissecting the psychology of the perfect opening. We know how to use candor, curiosity, logic, and shock to grab a reader by the collar. But understanding the theory is only about 10% of the battle. This brings us to key idea 5, which transitions us from the creative drafting of the lead into the grueling, unglamorous mechanical reality of editing. We are talking about Settle's 10-step editing crucible.
This is where amateurs and professionals diverge. Amateurs rely on a burst of inspiration. They write a clever lead, fall in love with their own words, hit publish, and pray it works. Professionals rely on systematic, stress-tested engineering. Settle's 10-step process is a mechanical gauntlet designed to violently hunt down and destroy any word, phrase, or punctuation mark that might cause the reader to lose focus.
So what does this all mean? Let's walk the listener through this gauntlet, because the sheer physical endurance it requires is staggering. Step 1 is simple. Get it readable. Just brain dump the raw ideas onto the page, don't edit while you draft. But step 2 is where the crucible actually begins. Settle demands that you read the entire text out loud exactly 9 times. He specifically notes that doing this will drive your spouse, your roommates, and your dog completely bonkers. Now, I have to stop right here. Why out loud? Why not just read it in your head like a normal person?
This raises an important question about how we process information. To understand the necessity of this step, we have to look at the auditory processing of language versus visual processing. When you read silently, you are primarily using visual pattern recognition. Your brain is a highly evolved predictive engine. Because you are the author, your brain already knows the intention behind the text.
Right, I know what I meant to say.
Exactly. So as your eyes scan the page silently, your brain's predictive engine kicks in. It automatically autocorrects typos. It seamlessly bridges clunky transitions. It fills in missing prepositions. You don't actually read what is physically on the page. You read a hallucinated, perfected version of the text that exists only in your mind. Your brain lies to you in order to save cognitive energy.
That explains why you can proofread an email 3 times, hit send, and then instantly see a massive typo in the sent folder. The context changed, so your brain stopped autocorrecting it.
Precisely. But when you are forced to read the text out loud, you bypass that visual predictive engine and route the information through your auditory processing centers, Broca's area and Wernicke's area in the brain. You have to physically coordinate your diaphragm, vocal cords, tongue, and lips to form the syllables, and then you have to hear the resulting sound waves with your own ears. You completely remove the brain's ability to skip and autocorrect.
Let me demonstrate exactly what you mean. If I write a typical bloated corporate sentence like, our synergistically integrated, multi-platform paradigm leverages cutting-edge technological frameworks to optimize downstream revenue actualization. If I read that in my head, I nod along because I know the buzzwords. But reading it out loud, I literally ran out of breath halfway through. My tongue physically tripped over, synergistically integrated.
And that physical stumble is the ultimate diagnostic tool. Settle's ironclad rule is this. If you stumble over a word while reading it out loud, the reader will stumble over that exact same word in their mind. And when a reader stumbles, when they hit cognitive friction, they wake up from the hypnotic trance of reading. They remember they were reading an advertisement, their skepticism returns, and they look for the exit. Reading out loud is a mechanical, physical way to guarantee that your prose possesses an invisible, frictionless flow.
I'm doing it 9 times. Settle mentions that by the 6th or 7th read, you will be pushing through tears because of how tedious it becomes.
The repetition is necessary because the first few read-throughs only catch the glaring errors, the typos, the massive structural flaws. It is only on the 7th, 8th, and 9th read that you start to detect the micro-frictions. A 2-syllable word that should be a 1-syllable word, a comma that forces a pause where there shouldn't be one. You are polishing the stone until it is perfectly smooth.
Okay, let's keep moving through the crucible. Step 3 is fixing as you go. You are ruthlessly tightening the text. Step 4 is comparing your draft with your competitors, but crucially, you only do this after the 9th read. You check your research to assure you didn't miss any major benefits or angles they're using. Step 5 is sending the copy to a mastermind group or a trusted circle of peers. But I noticed Settle places a massive caveat on this step.
Yes, separating those checking mechanics from actual target market readers is critical. You send your work to a mastermind group, other professional writers or marketers, to check the mechanics. Did I miss a logical objection? Is the transition in paragraph 4 confusing? Do the bullets lack punch?
You are asking mechanics to look at the engine.
Exactly. However, you must violently separate their feedback from the feedback of your actual target market. If a brilliant millionaire copywriter tells you that a specific joke or cultural reference in your copy doesn't work, but that copywriter is a 60-year-old man and your target market is 25-year-old female nurses, you can safely ignore his opinion on the joke. He is not the market. But if a 25-year-old nurse reads your copy and says, "I don't understand this sentence," you must fix it immediately no matter how much you love it. The market is the only jury that matters.
That is a vital distinction. Moving on, step 6 is the cooling off weekend. You put the copy away, you do not look at it, you let it sit. Why is this necessary after you've already read it 9 times?
Because after 9 reads, you suffer from intense cognitive fatigue. You are too close to the canvas to see the painting. Taking 48 hours away from the text allows your subconscious to reset. When you return to it for step 7, the final 10th read out loud, you are approaching it with cold, objective eyes. Flaws that were invisible to you on Friday afternoon will scream at you on Monday morning.
And finally, step 8 is running it up the flagpole. You release it into the real world, you spend money driving traffic to it, and you let the market dictate whether you succeeded or failed. It really is an industrial process. It strips the ego entirely out of the writing process.
Writing the lead requires empathy and psychology. Editing the lead requires the cold, mechanical precision of an engineer. You are stress testing the structural integrity of the bridge before you allow 1,000 cars to drive over it.
I challenge the listener to never hit send on an important document without reading it entirely out loud at least once.
Yep.
To bring this into the real world, let's apply all of these theories, the candor, the curiosity, the flawless flow of the crucible, to a live teardown. Key idea 6 explores how to maintain the trance using a case study. The source material analyzes a sales letter written by a woman named Gina Paris for a course called Romance Rescue. The product is aimed at wives who are struggling with stress, distance, and a lack of intimacy in their marriages.
It is a phenomenal case study because the core DNA of the letter is actually very strong. Given the highly sensitive, deeply personal nature of the topic, Gina rightly avoids aggressive hype. She relies on a deeply vulnerable personal narrative. She is pacing the reader's pain perfectly. However, Settle acts as a forensic editor here, identifying several critical structural flaws where the hypnotic trance of the story is violently broken.
Let's look at the specific surgical tweaks Settle recommends. First, the letter opens with a strong, curiosity-driven question lead, but then it immediately jumps into making claims about the course without ever establishing who is actually speaking. It feels untethered. Settle recommends injecting immediate credentials right after the lead to show the reader who is speaking. He suggests she write, "My name is Gina Paris, and until recently I was a happy wife who made my husband miserable."
Notice how perfectly that maps back to the candor lead we discussed in the beginning. She isn't leading with a degree in marriage counseling. She is leading with a devastating, highly relatable flaw. By immediately establishing her identity through vulnerability, she anchors the narrative. The reader needs to know the human being behind the words before they are willing to invest their own emotional energy into the story.
But the most crucial lesson from this teardown is what Settle calls sacking the speed bumps. Gina had written this highly emotional flowing story about the struggles in her marriage. But right in the middle of this deeply personal narrative, she inserted blocks of glowing customer testimonials and glossy pictures of the physical DVDs.
This is perhaps the most common and destructive mistake modern marketers make. You spend days utilizing candor, open loops, and the 10-step editing crucible to pull the reader into a deep, empathetic flow state. The reader is emotionally engaged, reliving their own marital struggles through Gina's story. And then abruptly, they smash into a wall of 5-star reviews and a picture of a plastic DVD case.
I think of it like this. Imagine you and I are sitting in a coffee shop. You are bearing your soul to me. You're telling me a heartbreaking secret about your life. I am completely locked in, hanging on your every word, feeling your pain. And right in the middle of your sentence, I whip out a shiny brochure, slam it on the table, point to it, and scream, "Hey, look at this cool cover."
That would be horrible.
Right. Putting a testimonial in the middle of a deep, emotional story completely shatters the emotional connection. The spell is shattered.
That is exactly what happens on a neurological level. The state of reading a compelling narrative is a fragile form of mild hypnosis. We call it the trance. When a reader encounters a block of testimonials or a product shot in the middle of a story, it is a glaring neon sign that screams, "Hey, you are reading a commercial right now." It jolts them out of the emotional narrative and forces them back into their logical, skeptical consumer mindset. You have actively awoken them from the trance you worked so hard to put them in.
But wait, every marketing book ever written says you need social proof. You need testimonials to build trust. If I can't put them in the copy, where do they go?
Of course you need proof, but you must strictly quarantine it from the narrative path. Settle advises moving all testimonials, reviews, and flashy product graphics out of the main column. Put them in the sidebars where the eye can glance at them without interrupting the downward flow of the text. Or, better yet, push them entirely to the end of the pitch after the emotional story has concluded, and you have naturally transitioned into the logical justification for the price and the guarantee. You must violently protect the narrative flow at all costs. The sale is a highly fragile thing. Anything that reminds the reader they are reading an ad wakes them up from the narrative dream state.
Settle also points out that while her story was great, she needed to extract more bullets from her course material. Taking the fascinating little tips inside her videos and turning them into punchy, curiosity-driven bullet points directly from the course material.
Bullets act as rapid-fire curiosity loops. The emotional story establishes the deep need for a solution. The bullet points then prove, without giving away the secret, that the specific granular solutions actually exist inside the product. They build the sheer desire to finally close all those open loops.
So if I'm reviewing my own sales page or pitch deck tomorrow, I need to ruthlessly hunt down my own speed bumps. I need to look at every graphic, every quote, every bolded claim, and ask myself, does this element serve the immediate emotional momentum of the story, or does it distract from it? If it is a distraction, no matter how much I love the design, I have to rip it out of the main flow and push it to the end. My own proof elements cannot be allowed to sabotage my story.
Exactly. The visual and structural layout of your message must serve the psychological journey of the reader, not just serve as a trophy case for your features.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, diving deep into the hidden, cryptic mechanics of human attention. Let's synthesize this journey. We started with the raw psychology of the first paragraph, using candor, curiosity, and shock to grab the reader. We bypassed the massive walls of modern skepticism by embracing our flaws to build instant trust.
Right.
We looked at how to hack the brain's biological need for closure using highly specific anxiety-inducing curiosity loops like Bensavenga's spinach salad. We moved into the architecture of inevitability, using Eugene Schwartz's if-then framework to shift the burden of proof and pace the reader's reality. We examined the physical realities of cognitive load, utilizing bite-sized leads to overcome visual inertia, and unlikely source leads to weaponize cognitive dissonance.
A lot of tools.
It is. And then we walked through the grueling, dog-annoying discipline of reading out loud 9 times to ensure every word earns its keep, bypassing the brain's predictive engine for frictionless flow. And we finished by learning to violently protect the reader's trance from speed bumps.
When you weave all of these distinct threads together, the singular underlying truth of Settle's methodology emerges. A successful lead, and by extension a successful pitch, is never an act of demanding attention. You cannot force a human being to care about you. True persuasion is an act of total empathy. It's about stepping so perfectly into the reader's world, their fears and their curiosities, that not reading your next sentence feels like a physical impossibility. You are no longer writing at them. You are aligning your words with their internal neurology.
It is empathy weaponized for effective communication. You now have the cryptic tools to pull almost anyone into your world with just a handful of perfectly engineered sentences. You can bypass their defenses. You can command their absolute focus. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you look at your own blank page. Once you have successfully deployed these tools, once you have cracked the lock, dragged them past the lead, and you have their unbreakable attention, what exactly are you going to do with them?
The lead only opens the door. It doesn't close the sale.
Exactly. Because the only thing more powerful than an irresistible, neurologically impossible to ignore opening hook is the devastatingly persuasive story you decide to tell them next.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.